It's time for Conversations with Bob and Sherry. Hello, Sherry.
Hi, Bob.
Today we're going to kick off a new segment that we're calling The Decline of America. That sounds negative, and it should be, but it's not in the spirit of critics of America. It's not a left-wing gloating over the decline of America. It's more in the spirit of Paul Revere. It's a call to arms. There's problems in our country, and we talk a lot about the popular news, but some of the more important critical things that are happening are not really getting the news coverage. And if they don't, then that means people aren't thinking about it. So we want to point some of those things out. And, it's not just us. We'll definitely point to other news sources.
Okay, so what's the first thing we want to talk about?
Well, the decline of the U.S. dollar. Sherry, you've been mentioning how China's trying to establish their currency as the world standard. When Ukraine war started, the United States announced that we had frozen Russian assets. In fact, Joe Biden bragged about it in the State of the Union. Republicans in Congress, many were behind it. We're fighting the evil Russian dictator. The U.S. dollar is the global standard currency. That means the vast majority of the banks in the world use the United States dollar as their reserve currency. So every economy in the world is essentially built on the United States dollar. When he said we froze their assets, we froze their dollars in their reserve banks. We essentially shut down the Russian economy. I think he bragged 60% decline in the ruble overnight, like that was a good thing. Mm-hmm. That now triggers to the rest of the world that the United States is going to use their currency to impose their will on other countries. That has taken, there's always been competition for world currency, but that has really caused a lot of countries to move quickly away from the dollar. Now, China is stepping in to try to become the leader and establish their currency. There are large countries like India who are looking to use their own currency as their reserve standard. So if the United States loses that, which we're well on our way to doing, that means the United States dollar value is going to decline. So the inflation that we have now, that's like throwing gasoline on the inflation. It's a dollar. Cash money has no real value. It's paper. So it's a relative value. It's based on supply and demand. If these countries stop using the U.S. dollar, there's now a much greater supply than there is demand in circulation. So that's going to cause much, much greater inflation. And now with that inflation, you can't even fund the military. Some of this happened to the Weimar Republic in Germany, which brought on the Nazi Party and Hitler. So this is serious. This is a very serious situation. So not only are we talking about inflation, but we're talking about long-term instability of the dollar. In theory, if we were to establish a country that was completely self-sufficient, if we didn't have to import anything at all, let's say we produced all of our oil, all of our food, everything here, in theory, the value of the dollar is not that important because it stays within our country. As a matter of fact, some countries, when they encounter financial problems, have devalued their own currency. That's what Germany was doing. They devalue their currency so that their exports, they produce products in their own country much more cheaply, and when they export it, they actually make more money relative to their own currency. So in theory, if we didn't have to import anything, the value of the dollar wouldn't matter nearly as much. The problem, it's exasperated by the fact that we have to import virtually everything. So if the dollar value declines, that is exactly that. What that means is all the stuff that we buy around the world, including energy and oil, it's like a tremendous price increase. So so if your dollar declines and you go to Walmart, it looks to you like everything in Walmart, the prices went way up. This will happen to all of our imports. So the costs of every one of our imports will skyrocket, and that will create a very, very bad situation in the American economy. So people need to pay attention to this. We need to stop cheerleading what's happening over in Ukraine. Not only that, we're continuing to print more money and send more money in there. I mean, you know, is Putin power hungry to take over that land? Or did he collude with China and predict the United States reaction and that this is really a financial war? So people say, why would Putin went in there with his military and he thought he was going to walk away with it? Did he really? Who knows? I mean, if they knew, if they had any inkling of what Biden was going to do by freezing those assets, then they are executing a master strategy to bring down the United States on the world stage.
Well, I think if you think about how this war even started, it had a lot to do with our policy. So far, every single one of the policy the Biden administration have implemented in the world stage has benefited Russia and China.
Yes.
So Brazil, Russia, India, and China, they just signed an agreement. They are going to start trading with yuan. Just give you an example. 20 years ago, $1 equal to 8 yuan. Okay, and you can trade on the black market for $1 to 10 yuan. Now you go back to China, you have to go to the bank, and yuan is $1 is to $6.87 yuan. So that's how much the yuan has value. Another thing you got to understand, first of all, India is never going to take over the international, they're not going to be the world standard because India still is controlled pretty much by gangsters and mafias. So their currency is very fluid. But China has a very stable economy. China has a manufacturer-based economy. So, and then they have spreading their influence all over the world. In the past 20 years, when we're busy fighting wars and fighting with, we have a lot of infighting in this country, when China has spreading their influence around the world. Japan just started to buy oil from Russia. Now, why do you think that is? That's our Japan's supposed to be our ally in Asia because America has weakened a lot because they see what Americans doing politically. They're infighting. These are news not being spread on the news media. So is America in decline? Yeah, if we continue to go with the direction we're going now, we are in decline because the voters, the general voters, the Gen Z voters are not paying attention to that. They're being emotionally triggered to vote the party, and then the party they voted for is putting America in decline in the international stage.
Yeah, India, it doesn't matter if India goes to China's currency or uses their own. Either one is bad because it means that they're not using the dollar. So it's not necessarily benign if a country goes to some other currency other than China. If they stop using the dollar, there's a domino effect. You know, OPEC recently announced cuts. You had sent the article to me, and if you read the article, they did that in coordination with Russia. Russia is not an OPEC country, so again, you're seeing these countries that have oil, that have resources, working on the world stage. We shut down our oil. Now, some will argue we didn't shut it down. What's that?
I was just going to say, guess who else have lots of oil in their ground?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have this, and Biden said that we're going to shut down our fossil fuels in the name of global climate change. Then in the State of the Union, he said, well, okay, we're going to probably have to have oil for 10 years. And the Republicans laughed. I mean, there's really nothing funny about that. They laughed because we want it more. Him saying that we're going to need it 10 years, that's bad for the industry. Why would you invest? Why would you do long-term oil exploration when the president of your country said he's going to shut you down somewhere between now and 10 years?
Well,
But
there's another, when we were talking about American decline, there's a local news that's directly impacting people of this country. Is just recently USDA has announced they're going to lower the WIC program. The WIC program is a program that provides single moms or low income mothers to give their kids, basic food. That's milk and dairy products and eggs. They're going to take 3 gallons of milk per month away from the WIC program. They say this is based on science. Now, I don't know what science that says more milk for infants to teenagers is a bad thing, right? So now, not only they took away the money, they took away the money from the food stamps while we have an inflation to the poor families. Now they're taking away more milk and dairy products from the WIC program.
what science? What is that? Climate science? Are they trying to reduce oil? Or I'm sorry, are they trying to reduce milk consumption?
They're trying to reduce cow farts, probably.
Or, see, this is an example of people think that inflation only affects workers and small. No, it affects the government as well.
Yeah.
So you start seeing pullbacks in government spending, military, everything. When the dollar is worth less, the government can't do. I want to just say something about generations and, personally, I try not to criticize Gen Z, millennial, this or that. And the reason being, those people, those generations are largely influenced by the world around them. All of us are. So the world that they grew up in, which is the world that we helped build, that we allowed to happen through the media, social media, or whatever, has given them the perspective that they have. So I don't see them as at fault. I don't say things like what they have to understand is. I think it's our job to stand together and help each other and say, this is what's going on. Make them want to receive the information. People don't listen to you. There's a saying in sales. People don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. So if you're talking at someone, if you're talking down to someone, they don't listen to you. If they realize you care about them and you're doing it to help them, they're more receptive to what you might have to say. And a big part of this call to arms for me is to bring people together. There's no reason for us to be so divided, especially on the conservative side, but all over. Some of the things that are happening with this culture war, it's getting really bad for our kids. The vast majority of Americans, if they had an honest view and understanding of what was going on, we could rally around that. But if a parent says, well, I agree with them on this issue, but because there's that January 6th thing, that's called division, and that's what they're doing on purpose.
You're basically fighting with years indoctrination of these children in schools, right? So right. Parents are fighting, or conservative parents, whatever parents are fighting, the large amount of media, the indoctrination, schools indoctrination on social media. So you have a generation, yes, I believe every generation is looking to fight for something. The generation now is fighting for social justice. This is something that's in social media, and it's very difficult to turn this around. Bill Maher compared our woke culture to the Russian and Chinese Cultural Revolution. Now, Chinese Cultural Revolution took 10 years for people to wake up from it. And when they did wake up from it, the country was a mess. It took another 50 years to get back to normal, right? Just to get back to normal, not to be in front of everybody to get back to normal. Now China will never go back to the Cultural Revolution. They have a totalitarian government. But again, I said it many times on the show, it's capitalism. So we're dealing with two generations of indoctrination from the colleges, schools. Now they start from kindergarten they start the kids as young as kindergarten now. So how do you fight from that?
Well, I'll tell you, we allowed this to happen. And how we fight for it is part of the reason I wanted to kick off a regular segment where we talk about it. Because I think on the more moderate conservative side of the country, we're busy living our lives. We see glaring problems and we just want to point out that problem, fix that problem, and move on. We're into the quick fix. And this thing didn't happen overnight. This has happened over decades. Slowly, slowly, slowly. They even used the slow walk through the institutions. That's a hearkening back to Mao. They just slowly took over higher education. Conservatives said, well, they're just a bunch of eggheads. They don't do any real work. We're just going to let that happen. And then look where we're at today. It's in our K through 12 schools. It's in corporate America. It's in healthcare, this gender affirming care. I mean, it's in climate science. So science has been misused and corrupted. The entire education system from kindergarten all the way through. And it didn't happen overnight. It happened slowly. So it's not going to go away overnight either. There's not a quick, what are we going to do? It has to be a process over time where we help each other, we open each other's eyes and work against some of the division and things that are being used to keep us from being able to go counter it. If long as we're divided, we're never going to be able to undo this. That's how they accomplished this in the first place.
Well, this is why people leaving, some people just give up, right? Like how people in California, they moved to Texas and Nashville. And now that after the election of Chicago, a lot of people are going to be leaving Chicago now because the city of Chicago just elected a mayor that's more progressive than the last mayor. Okay, so now you see where the voters are going.
But how long? About it this way.
That's a $1 million question. How long? If
we allow California to become more red, to be like completely Marxist saturated, and Pennsylvania, and Illinois, and New York, that's just a beachhead. They're not going to allow Florida and Alabama and Georgia. They start in the major cities. So where you have major cities of population and prosperity in Atlanta, that's a beachhead. And they just slowly think of it like an infection. Think of it like a disease that just slowly spreads throughout the population. So moving away gives me, my age, I could move to Florida and really be happy. I love going to Florida. People think like me. They act like me. All races, immigrants, everybody. We have good old traditional American values. But it's not going to last because we're just surrendering all this territory, all this influence over our country, and they're just going to keep spreading slowly. They're patient and they're consistent, and they just keep it going.
I don't think it's spreading slowly. I think it's spreading pretty quickly. Look what happened in the last few elections, right?
Well, I think that it's been spreading. We became aware of it because of COVID. Parents had no idea what was happening in schools. It didn't go from zero to indoctrination overnight. It was already happening. We had no idea about it. And only when parents started to speak up and say, wait a minute, what did I see over here? What's going on over here? Then we start looking at it with more of a microscope, and a lot more things become apparent. So there may have been questionnaires in the past about that obviously are trying to gauge a family's political affiliation. You have no idea there's anything going on in the school. Some weird questionnaire comes along. You go, whatever. We're not going to fill that out, but you don't do anything. But now when you have an idea of what's really going on behind the curtain, you see that and you go, this is bad. I don't like this. We need to do something about it. So I think our awareness of it has happened very quickly, but it's also like a snowball rolling downhill. It starts off small, but as it rolls, it gets bigger and bigger. So as it gains momentum and gains influence and power, yeah, it's going to take over faster and faster.
Well, one of the things kind of give me hope about this is the recent announcement of Robert Kennedy Jr. is running for put his hat in the Democratic presidential race.
Right.
That gives me a lot of hope because we can get him if he become the Democratic nominee and whoever is on the other side, I don't care who it is. I think we'll have two really great Americans running. Either one wins, it's a win for America.
Yeah.
That's what gives me hope. So I'm praying at the Democratic primary, I'm praying Mr. Kennedy Jr. will win the Democratic nomination. I might even vote for him.
You know, and whatever you think about Donald Trump, so a lot of people like me voted for Donald Trump for his pragmatic business approach.
Right.
America first. That's being characterized as racist, white supremacist. It is nothing of the kind. What you're seeing happening now, what we just described with the American dollar and Russia and China and, you know, the United States in decline, that's exactly what America first was meant to oppose. It's like a business transaction. If you are in a business and you have all these ethical, moral rules that you follow, but when you meet with another company, you only engage in transactions that benefit you. You're not in business to give your money away to help other people. You're in business to protect your own interests, your own shareholders, your own employees, and you're responsible for growing your business. And that's what Donald Trump brought. That's what he did when he talked about NATO, and that's what he did. The rest of the globe respected us. And this, I don't believe, as long as Donald Trump had decent advisory on Russia at this time, I do not believe he would have frozen their assets. Now, the Democrats probably would have been calling for it and saying he was a Russian asset by not doing it, but I don't believe he would have done it because someone who understands business, who understands negotiation, and who understands economics to some extent would never have let this happen.
First of all, if Donald Trump was in office, this war would have never happened because Trump pretty much cut the lifeline out of Russia by selling our natural resources to Europe, right?
No matter how you slice it, it would have been
yeah,
better.
Russia didn't have the money to fight this war. But when Biden came into office, he sanctioned our oil industry and gave Russia the lifeline to sell their oil to Europe. We're still buying gasoline. We're still buying natural resources from Russia.
Yes.
Now Japan is buying from Russia probably because China's buying from Russia. So if they align with China, they get a cheaper oil from Russia.
We lost energy independence. It's a fact. We were energy independent, and with the stroke of a pen, Joe Biden gave it away. And people could the pipeline this and no. This is a speculative industry. These are commodities. So when the government takes a position like Biden did, there goes your industry.
So Russia took Crimea during the Obama years. Russia's in Ukraine. Guess what they did during Trump years? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And guess what Trump also did? Because you were talking about German devalue its currency to make their economy better. And here's what happened during Trump years. Wait a second. Trump charged tariff to all the importing goods from China.
Right.
Okay. Our dollar was strong during the Trump years. And guess what China have to do is by discounting their FOB prices, which that's freight on board, by 60%. So when you use to compensate for the tariff because Trump made them not competitive in their manufacturing price. So they did. So
that was money. So that tariff was actually being paid by the Chinese government.
$16 billion, right? We collected $16 billion tariff money. And then people was crying, oh, you charge China tariff, our goods going to be more expensive. It didn't because the manufacturer lowered their manufacturer costs to importing to United States by 60% in order to be competitive to Vietnam and Southeast Asia.
Trump knows how to use your position of strength. Where people need us, where people need you more than you need them, you use that. I'm not saying you crush people. That's what's being done to us. I'm not saying that at all. But when you enter into a negotiation, if you have a relationship where the other party benefits from you, then that should be also beneficial to you. A fool takes a situation where the other party needs you, but then you submit to them. That's just insanity. That's a fool. These people are not our friends. I mean, and nobody in business, from one business to another, is your friend.
One must question, is it coincidental? I mean, I know everybody questioning Biden's ability to govern, but is it coincidental every single policy he has implemented has benefited Russia and China?
I don't believe so. When you look at the hiring of the special classes of people, the people not necessarily the best people for the job, but wow, we got a trans person doing this, we have a gay person doing that, and everything is about climate. You have a very Marxist-based administration. So I would say absolutely not. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think they're more focused on their vision of a Marxist utopia. And quite frankly, China is an ally in that, and so is Russia. That's their legacy, their history. Our legacy and history of how this country was built is being called racist and white supremacist and evil. And we're in favor of an ideology and a value system that built Russia and China. No, I don't think it's a coincidence.
No, it's not coincident. And does it have something to do with how much money he has collected from the both countries?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, is that not worth investigating?
I don't know. I mean, that depending who's in power, right? We're putting the United States continue to become more and more democratic through each election because, so we'll see what happens in the next election. I don't have too much faith. It seems like when you have so many counting going on as far as the election. But again, my new hope is people that's used to vote for Democrat now finally have a second choice in Robert Kennedy Jr. So I'm hoping that will be the case because if he become the nominee of the Democratic Party, I personally wouldn't care what the other side is because either way, whether it's DeSantis or Trump or Robert Kennedy Jr., I believe all those people will put America first. But certainly right now, we do not have an administration that puts America first.
I'm to the point. And yes, I'm a Republican, but I've never said it. I'm to the point where I don't know that any Democrat, whether it's a president, Speaker of the House, Senate Majority Leader, I don't know that any of them are going to be good for this country for any foreseeable future. I mean, even if they don't believe in these ideologies, they're pandering to it.
Right.
The Trump, I would encourage everyone, regardless of where you are on the spectrum, pay attention to this Trump indictment. Set aside how you feel about it and really pay attention to what's happening and what does he ever get convicted of a crime? I mean, we did a video yesterday. You can see it's an interview with David Houck that in a private business, and Sherry's a small business owner, you can do whatever you want with your money. You're not accountable to anyone. If you want to expense something and call it something different, unless it affects, it's an issue of evading taxes or defrauding a bank in terms of a loan. If it's just a matter of, I used an example. I don't know if you watched it, but I was thinking of you when I did it. I said if a man owned a bar and he had a party where he brought in a bunch of prostitutes and then he didn't want his wife to see that, he might put it in the books as catering for his party. There's nothing illegal about that at all.
I gotta tell you something. When you said that,
Did you know I was thinking about you for that
it cracked
example?
me up because my husband never brought in strippers, but I did. I had a night where we had a lady-only night. We brought in male strippers, and my husband was completely against it. I said, well, let's try it out. But yet it was an entertainment expense, right? I mean, my husband fully knows that we brought the stripper in, but it was an entertainment expense.
No.
So I could call it a DJ, I could call it whatever, but
Right.
you can just put it in the. I could have called it an operating cost expense.
Yeah, doesn't matter. It's as long as you're not defrauding someone else or avoiding taxes, it really doesn't matter. And for $130,000 transactions within $1 billion company, it's immaterial. It's literally immaterial to taxes and bank loans, but it's still an expense. So it's not even really going to affect taxes or bank loans. It's not like they hid the expense. They just called it something. They called it a legal expense that he paid it through an attorney. Most states, I doubt that would even be a misdemeanor. And that's the reason it's a misdemeanor. There's no victim. It's not really a crime. It's his money to do with what he wants. The only way, that's why they keep saying they have to bootstrap it to some felony. So if he had done it with the intent of avoiding taxes or the intent of defrauding an investor or a bank for a loan or something like that, but he didn't actually follow through, then he didn't commit a felony in the tax thing or in the loan, but he had the intent. That's what they're trying to connect this to. And so I want people to pay attention because experts on all sides of it are saying this is going nowhere. This is a complete joke. It has to be political so that, why? I mean, now I forget.
By the way, he took $130,000 out of his own pocket to pay for a adult film star stripper, whatever. Right. By bringing him to New York City cost $250 million. That's New York taxpayers. That's our money, and they were begging the judge not to bring him back again because that's another $250 million, over $130,000 payment essentially. Right. So no, the judge said no, we're going to bring you back, and then the judge's daughter works for Kamala Harris's old law firm. I mean, shouldn't this judge be recusing himself?
If you watch Billions,
yes, I love that show.
Personal discretion plays a lot in these things, but ultimately, an attorney general, a state attorney general, has a duty to the state, the people of the state. There's crimes happening all the time. What the attorney generals should be doing is focusing on the crime that are doing the most harm to the state and the people of the state. How in the world did this harm the state of New York? And as far as it being unprecedented, is it unprecedented because he's an unprecedentedly, he committed an unprecedented crime as a president, or is it unprecedented because of the politicization of this, using the government justice system for political gain to attack an opponent? Here's the president of El Salvador tweeted this out. Think what you want about former President Trump and the reasons he's being indicted. But just imagine if this happened in any other country where a government arrested the main opposition candidate. The United States' ability to use democracy, in quotes, as foreign policy is gone. Yeah. I mean, this is part of the decline. So not only are we declining in terms of influence because of our currency, but even these principles and morals that we stood upon. And yet they're going to stand there and tell you that this is a strength for democracy. There are people on the other side that will say, no one is above the law. This really strengthens our stance on democracy. That's a complete lie. Take a walk outside the country, look at it from the outside, and this El Salvador president is absolutely right. This is undermining our credibility, our commitment to democracy and fairness and justice, and it's just part of our decline.
What about all the congressional people using money from the taxpayer to pay out their hookers?
Yep.
Right, $17 million was paying out a the Congressional Operation
Well,
Office to pay
yeah, I mean,
off.
thankfully they passed a law now that
It doesn't matter
the
because,
government's not going to pay for that anymore. They have to pay their own
hey,
out of their own
listen,
pockets.
this case is past the statute of limitation too. If that's the case, we can drag up all those people from Congress and start indicting every single one of them.
Right.
And what about Bill Clinton? Right, he paid $800,000 to Paula Jones, and I don't know how much Monica got paid, how much Jennifer Flowers got paid.
Hush money's not illegal. There's not I'm not the
In
way they
this case,
present
they did
this in
hush.
the media. See, I don't blame the people. People trust in these institutions, have always traditionally, because they're supposed to be informed. They're supposed to be really providing a service to the people, and they're not. I mean, when you misinform people and you use your platforming for political and ideological gain, it's the people who are suffering. So that's why I think our job here, this segment is a call to arms, like Paul Revere, to say, we want to be part of the solution. We're not here to bash other people and to blame whether they're a generation, whether they're Republican or Democrat. I want to expose the problem, which is the political party. It's the media. And, that's it. If the media were reporting this stuff accurately to hold the government accountable, then we wouldn't have to do this. And for the first time I can remember, you have a political party that's weaponizing government, federal law enforcement, the justice system, and now even the state justice system. And the only way it's going to stop is when voters say, hey, stop. We're not voting for this. This is not what we want.
I have a call to arm message. Change your registration to Democrat and vote RFK in the primary. Because
I think we ought to wrap up. Keep it to about 30 minutes. And if you want to talk about more, we can do another
No,
segment.
I'm done. I'm just saying vote for RFK because Trump is going to be the nominee anyway. They practically nominated Trump by indicting him.
I want to correct something I said yesterday for anyone, and I'll put it in the description too. The interview with David Houck, I had referred to the payments that Stormy Daniels had to make to Donald Trump as part of he sued her for the NDA. That's not what it was. Him and his law firm decided they're not going to enforce the NDA. So they said she's free to speak and do whatever she wants. We're not going to enforce that. These payments are because she sued him for defamation over a tweet. And he won that case. These are judgments to pay his legal fees because he countersued on that defamation case. So right now I think it's up to $500,000 ish that Stormy doing. I mean,
there's a lot of lap dances.
I feel sorry for her, honestly. I mean, Trump's a victim in this, obviously, but I think she's even more so because she had this sleazy lawyer that by the way, the Democrats and CNN, they just loved him. I think he had the most appearances on CNN in a period of time of anyone. He set new records. They loved him. They anointed him the next president of the United States, and he's in jail for ripping her off. So her lawyer, who was supposed to be representing her, ripped her off. She was led down this path. You're better off trying to sue Trump. She lost that. I mean, it's her attorneys made money out of that. She didn't.
I don't think he's in jail because of her. I think he's in jail because of a Nike case. Nike went after him.
Well, he was defrauding a lot of his clients,
right?
But yeah, it was maybe it wasn't specifically charged for her, but it was uncovered in that he basically took all of her money too. Yeah,
I think it was $3 million lawsuit from somebody that's related to Nike, and he represented the client, but he took the money. I
don't think she gained any money. I think that, these judgments against her, she's never going to be able to pay Trump. It doesn't appear. No. I guess if she writes a book. So even if she comes out writing books and doing the anti-Trump hate thing, I mean, part of that is she's just trying to figure out a way to make a living.
Right. That's what I'm saying. There's going to be is a lot of lap dances to make 500
Yeah.
grand. So, but
Yeah, but nobody's going to, after what she did to Trump, is anyone going to trust her? Is anybody with big money going to trust her? I don't think so.
I think guys will go watch her dance and buy her movies.
Yeah, regular Joes
No.
would, sure. She
Yeah,
could be a draw at strip
men will be
joints.
curious, but I don't know. But
Ten
well,
bucks at a time.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, well, you want to wrap up the show?
Yes. All right, so that's our segment for today. I think we should continue this series and try to do it in the spirit we just did. But if you notice now, a lot of the stories we've been commenting on fall into this same sort of situation where if you add it all up, it's all part of the decline here. And we need to just wake people up so that we can start working against it.
Well, we want to try to report addressing news that's not being reported on the news. I think
Right.
that's the frustrating part. The things that really affects us as a nation, affects our daily lives, are not being reported on the news.
No, they're not.
You know, whether Trump's indicted or not indicted, it doesn't. It's not really concerning me. It doesn't impact my life. I
No.
don't care.
But they get everybody hot and bothered about it. All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Have a good one.